Hi, who are you?
My name is Ashley Jackson, and I define myself as I am an attorney, I am a professor, I am a community builder, and I am an entrepreneur.
An entrepreneur. First of all, you're an attorney. What law do you practice?
So I am a global data privacy and artificial intelligence law expert. And so I work with healthcare systems. Right now, I work for a healthcare tech company. And so basically helping companies to use data to improve healthcare, the delivery of healthcare, paying for healthcare through insurance, et cetera.
Hmm, data research, that's something that's really big in today's time. Do you find that to be tedious work?
I love it. I think especially with things like obviously it's something that I've been working on for a while. But things with like Chat GPT, all my friends, I have a group chat. They send messages every morning asking me when the AI is gonna go rogue and take over. Uh, and my response is it's not, but I think it's really exciting because people are starting to see how it impacts their everyday life. And I think that it's getting a little closer to home and it's a developing area of law. So we're in a space where we're actually, we're defining the law, we're writing it now, and being able to be part of those conversations to me is very intellectually stimulating.
And that is, like you said, that's pretty much on the forefront. This is like the base ground. How's that working?
So I will say, I think I started working at GE Healthcare literally I started a month before everything shut down for the pandemic. And for me, it was really eye-opening to see how data and technology helped us to respond to that all around the world. How it made, being able to diagnose COVID quicker, more efficient, getting accurate diagnoses, literally saving people's lives. And so, I think being able to bring some of the things that have been happening in the AI space more to the forefront of people's minds, right? People have their Alexas, their Siris, their Googles in their house. But sometimes they don't always appreciate the technology that's behind that and how it applies to all of these other things. So I think it's really exciting. And I think it's even more exciting when you can talk to your family and friends. They can relate to it. They can share, what their concerns are. Because I will say, like, as I approach the gray areas, I definitely think of, my friends who are like, oh, I think it's going to take over. And I'm like, okay, well, we need to be very clear with people, right, about how we're using their data, make sure they can understand it, make sure they understand the limitations. So it's definitely something that I really enjoy. And, I think sometimes law can be boring or people are like, let the lawyers figure it out. And I feel like this is an area where it really is going to take all of us to figure it out. And so, being someone who enjoys working with the community, I think it's a great opportunity.
What other community work do you do? You said you work with the community.
So I am the board president and co-founder of a nonprofit that's actually out of California in the Central Valley. It's called Community Justice Alliance. And me and one of my best friends from law school, in addition with some other colleagues, started it after we did a project down at the border in 2018. So 2018 was when Donald Trump was president. He was separating families at the border. It created a crisis. There were literally families that had been split apart, and the government was struggling to put it back together. And so we went down to Texas. We represented families that were in detention. So they had been reunited. They were being detained, seeking asylum here in the United States. We were able to actually get a couple of families released. But then the question was, okay, now these families are here in the United States. You know, their asylum application isn't complete. They're going to go to these communities, and then what's going to happen? They're not going to have the services they need. They may not have the legal representation they need to see their application all the way through. So even though we're doing this great work here, it's really for nothing if there are not additional supporting services after this. And one of the families was going back to where my best friend and the rest of the team reside in Central Valley, California. So it's like Fresno and then up to Sacramento area. And we decided we would start a nonprofit to help provide those additional services. This particular family, we were actually able to get their application approved, get them their green card. But we also expanded it to not just the legal aspect, but also more social services. So during COVID, we did a lot of like vaccine drives, household essential drives, for various families in the community. And really it's about advocating and amplifying not just voices of our immigrant communities, but also the marginalized communities in California and the area that we represent. So it's been really exciting. Obviously I'm here in Chicago, so I, do a lot of the admin stuff, but I give complete credit to Christina and the team she is leading out in California. We started it in 2018 and she's built it to over $1 million budget. We have staff. Yeah, it's like, so it's something I'm really proud of, really excited for. And, just to see where it goes from here. And then locally, I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta, the Evanston North Shore chapter, so I participate in their service projects. And then I also serve on the board of a nonprofit called the I-Lead Foundation, and that serves young men of color in the city to make sure they have the resources they need in terms of like starting from the basics, food, clothing, shelter, but then also providing them resources to be successful in whatever avenues they're pursuing. So providing scholarships. And I think sometimes when people hear scholarships, they automatically think college, but our goal is really to support them in whatever avenue they've decided to take. So whether that's trade school, whether that's, going to community college, some type of training, whatever it is that they see for themselves, supporting them in those endeavors and making sure that, to the best of our ability, money is not a factor in them deciding what they do.
Now, you just mentioned 3 boards that you're on. Did you find it difficult to get on those boards, and how were you able to find the knowledge or have the knowledge to be on the board?
So I will say the first one, I created the board. So that's
I love it. Yes.
But I will say in the past, like before I started my work with CJA, I was chair of the Black Women Lawyer Scholarship Board. And then with the I-Lead Foundation, I know the founder of that board. And so I help provide pro bono legal services to help them get their 501c3 and all of their legal documentation in place. But I would say, I think really it's about making connections. So, if people are interested in boards, obviously you should be connected and involved in that organization. I think sometimes people are like, oh, like I'll just sign up. Like, no, I think it's really important to have, if you're not like some celebrity, like have an active role in the organization, get to know the board members and the people that are involved, because as much as it is we're doing these great things for the community, you spend a lot of time with those board members. And, even though you may love the organization, the leadership and structure, that might not be your jam, right? Like that might not be how you function the best. And that's okay. But I think it's important to kind of flesh those things out to make sure that, even if you connect with the mission, the organization itself and how it's doing things, how it's running things, is a fit for you. I think it's like very similar to your like a job interview, right? But I think getting onto boards is very much kind of a who do you know, networking and connecting with people.
And you mentioned entrepreneurship. Can you give us an idea of what you're doing in entrepreneurship?
Sure. So I'm going to preface, because people are always like, how do you do all of these things? And I'm going to start by saying, I am very fortunate to have a village of people. There are 5 people in particular. It is me, my sister. She's technically my god sister, but I call her my sister. Our best friend who lives down in Texas, my husband, and his best friend and line brother. And we have collectively come together to really just support each other in our dreams. And so the endeavors that I am specifically owners of is my sister and I have a rum business called Halo 7. And so we decided to develop a premium craft rum. When we were little, we always had a business. Her mom was a social worker. My dad was in corporate. And so we had a social work office where we processed paperwork, we talked to the people. And so we always have just kind of had that mind. And as we grew up, we were like, oh, let's have a real business. What's something we really like to do? And we got to rum. And then me, my sister, and our best friend, we also are developing a mobile app. I can't talk too much about it, but developing a mobile app in the beauty space. And so those are things that, I'm really excited about, excited to see how they're developing. But I don't do anything I do by myself. I have a whole team behind me. And so, we really sometimes it's when everybody's here, it's like, oh, you got one business going on over there, one over there, one over there, one over there. Yeah. And we're just like shouting back, and it's like, wait, what are you talking about? Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I think it's really exciting, but it also lets me exercise, different parts of my brain. And then, add on to that, I am faculty at Oakton. So I also help direct the paralegal program, which is near and dear to my heart, because I think it's really important to shape the students and the leaders of the future, especially in the legal profession. So, I also find a lot of joy in that as well.
Beautiful. Beautiful. What has been the forming incident in your life?
A forming incident in my life?
Mm-hmm.
One incident that I think I talk about a lot is when I went to college. I went to University of Southern California. I started working, and I was, I had a student worker job, whatever the case is. And so I started working I was a business student, and I started working in the financial and business economics academic department. And I was hired by a woman named Marilyn Johnson, who was the administrator for that department. And I remember I don't even remember what we were talking about. And I was just telling her, I was like, I don't know if I should ask. I don't know, just talking through this issue with her. And she was like, but the worst thing they could ever tell you is no. Right? And if you don't ask, then the answer is already no. So if you go from that perspective, really, you can only go up from here. If you already know the worst case scenario, which is basically your current state because you haven't asked. Mm-hmm. And so she really ever since then, I think I always had this attitude of nothing is impossible. We just have to figure out how to do it. Sometimes when people hear me say that, especially because I'm an attorney, they're like, well, there are things you could go to jail for. Absolutely. But again, that doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it has a poor consequence to it. And you shouldn't do it. But I think that, you know, I have really taken that motto throughout my life. And, you know, even with things like, I never thought I would own a rum company. But we were like, like, let's Google it. Like, what would this actually entail? What would this actually require? And, you know, we put a lot of research and we do the work, but I think it really has, you know, from a business perspective, it helps me come up with just, you know, different ideas, really thinking outside of the box. From a legal perspective, it helps me come up with, you know, unique solutions for my clients, especially, you know, given the industry and space that we're in. And then I think even with working with students, it makes me incredibly flexible because I don't think there's just one way to do things. And I think that things are always evolving. So what worked for me as a student is not what's going to work for, you know, all of my students. And quite frankly, what works for one of my students isn't necessarily going to work for the rest of the class. And so, you know, I see that, I see kind of the perspective that I built in life as a result of that incident in a lot of what I do.
Yeah, I was taught as well, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And my uncle always told me, ask for what you want. The worst thing someone could tell you is no. So I grew up with the same information.
Right. And you know, it's funny because I'm like, I'm sure parents always say these things. It's just, you know, you need someone else to say it sometimes to really make it stick. So yeah, I talk about that a lot.
So I tell my son that all the time too. So what would you say nourishes you?
I love my people. I thrive not only when I succeed, but when the people around me succeed. You know, I nourish very close relationships. So it's funny, I was talking to some young attorneys about this the other day. I definitely have like my networking hat that I can put on. But I don't use the term friend loosely. And sometimes people will be like, think that's unfriendly. But like, I recognize I have limited energy. And so it's really important to me to put my energy into people that I truly care about, that I truly love. And, you know, that's why even though I have 50 million things going on, if somebody, you know, one of my friends is like, hey, I need help with this, I'm probably like, okay, how do we make it work? Right? Like, I might not be able to give you an hour, but I can give you 15 minutes and I'm willing to give you those 15 minutes. But it really is not just about me, but also my circle. Because I will say, you know, they motivate me. I am so grateful for them. And so, you know, it's important that I'm not the only one that wins, but like we all win together.
Yeah. And have you found that you all winning together, have you found that to be difficult or easy the more you trust and the more you work together?
You know, I think one thing about, so it's interesting because we've had this conversation, especially I think when we have things that don't work out as we wanted them to. And I think it's about making sure we have the safe space to be like, oh man, I didn't get this position, or you know, I'm really struggling with XYZ. But I will say one thing is, not only are we all very strong friends, we all also have a very strong spiritual connection in terms of, you know, we pray together. We talk about what those struggles are. We talk about, you know, even though you're winning in this season and I'm having a really difficult time, like the faith that you lean on to get you through that. And, you know, obviously we're definitely sensitive to it, but I think the fact that we celebrate each other equally, right? Because all of us do really impactful work. And so sometimes it's like, yeah, I know, you know, you may not have gotten this particular thing, but, you know, look at what you're doing in this space right now. And if you weren't here doing this, you know, these other 20 things wouldn't be happening. And so, you know, we always try to bring a perspective of like, well, you know, they didn't select you, that's their loss. Like, what you worried about them for? Like, clearly they have poor judgment.
Yes, yes.
um, and I think one thing that I have appreciated is sometimes like the perspective they give after the fact, right? So like when you get that accolade or that win and it's like, oh, you remember when you were really upset that you didn't get XYZ? Well, if you would have gone down that path, you wouldn't be right here to get this amazing thing that in reality, this is what you wanted, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that perspective helps us all get through some of those, you know, difficult days. But it's also balance, right? Like if we're all on a high, like we can't have 10 dinners in one day. So in some respects, it's like, yeah, you win this week, we'll go to dinner, celebrate that. You win next week, we'll go to dinner, celebrate that.
It's very true. Very true. It helps all the way around for
It
confidence, for
does.
support,
Yes.
keeping everyone balanced.
Yes.
Definitely, definitely. Um, as a Black woman, what would you say is your superhero or superpower? I'm sorry.
My superpower, I think my superpower is that my standard is always above and beyond. You know, I think sometimes this idea that we always have to be 10 times better,
Mhm.
it can definitely be exhausting. You know, when you see other people who are subpar and they're still achieving. But especially being in the space that I am in, um, I'm often the only Black woman in the room.
Mhm.
And so, like, who has the expertise that I have, right? And so the fact that I push myself, right? I've always grown up with that standard. It means I'm always 10 steps ahead. And I think that, you know, my ability to do that is what kind of drives me to what I talked about before, this idea that nothing is impossible.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it just allows me to kind of see like almost have like x-ray vision, right? So I don't just see what's in front of me, but I see what's like 10 steps ahead. But you know, it can be frustrating because all what you do sometimes feel like you're doing twice the work of everyone else around you. Um, but at the end of the day, you know, I think we're getting to a space where we are celebrating each other more. We're recognizing that. And I think that we're starting to see Black women because of that attitude are really at the forefront of a lot of their industries in pushing the industry forward and pushing, you know, increasing the standard. um and so that's what I would say is my super.
That, yeah, I we'll go on to the next question because that was beautiful. That was right on point. Do you believe you were living your purpose? If so, why? And if not, why?
I do think I'm living my purpose. You know, when I was younger, I had a very set like vision for myself. I was a rebellious teenager. I was like, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get out the house. I am going to be an attorney and I'm going to do my thing and I'm going to do XYZ. Um, and it was really interesting because, you know, I wanted to go to USC. I was able to go to USC. Once I got to USC, the world like opened up for me. And I was like, I may have been hot stuff at Evanston Township High School, but welcome to the real world. 2,000 miles away from home. And I struggled, and I think that was the first time in life that I had really struggled in that way. And in a way where it wasn't like I had people around me saying like, oh, it's okay, right? It's like, oh no, like you got a B- in this class. Like you go sit with the B- students. And so I had a lot of difficulty with that. And then when it was time for me to apply to law school, I don't know if I had lost my confidence, but I was kind of like I surprisingly took a very lax approach to it. Like I was like, I don't know where I want to go to law school. All of a sudden, like I didn't know things. And I applied to, so I was a research assistant for a professor. He had 7 degrees. And so I applied to every school he got a degree from except for UCLA because I was like, I cannot go to UCLA. So I applied to every single school. And one of those schools was Boston University. I had never been to Boston, like ever. I had never even thought about Boston. And I applied to a few other schools. And so I got all these rejections. And I was like, ugh, what am I going to do? Like, and then I kid you not, we went to church one morning and we came home and there was a packet in the mail that apparently had been dropped in a puddle, went through a rainstorm because the post office had to put it in plastic. I'd never seen this before ever in my life. They had to put it in plastic because it was incredibly damaged. And we opened it and I had an offer not only from BU Law, but also a almost full scholarship for tuition. And so at that point, I was like, everything happens for a reason. I have a path, I have a purpose, and sometimes you just got to go with the flow because you will shut down your own doors without even realizing it. And at that time, when one of the schools I was like waitlisted at Georgetown Law and they were going to pull me off the wait list, but then like I wasn't going to have a scholarship, like I wasn't have financial aid. And so at that time I was like, see, and like in terms of ranking, BU was a top 20 school. So that was great. And so ever since then, even though I get very frustrated, so like I went to BU Law. I have an amazing group of friends. There was we created this cohort of like minority students that we all helped each other through school. And, whenever I think about, or we talk about like all these other options or, these other things that we could have done instead of going to BU Law, I was like, that was our path. That was our purpose. And then when we graduated in the midst of a recession. None of us had jobs. And again, I just saw how things like started lining up. And even though it like went against this idea I had in my head, like I always had what I needed. I was never, my standard is like never be homeless and hungry. I always had a safe space. And so I definitely think things happen for a reason. I definitely think that I'm on the path that I meant to be on. And, I am confident that if there is a path that I want to be on, but shouldn't be on, it will not work out. So, I think the path of least resistance is the purpose that is meant for your life.
Yeah. What would you like more of in your life? What do you wish you had more of in your life?
I don't know if I wish I had more of anything particular in my life. I mean, like, of course, I'd love a private jet. I'd love to go anywhere in the world that I would want for any period of time. But one thing that I would like to see more in life is a better concern for our fellow citizens, right? Like, it really frustrates me that we have such a housing crisis. It really frustrates me that, you know, there are so many people who need mental health services or drug rehabilitation services or alcohol rehabilitation services that can't get them, and the way that that impacts their life. You know, it frustrates me, our approach to immigration in this country. Like, there are things that I just want for our society as opposed to like myself in particular. Um, because there's so much potential. We have the money to do it, and we just decide to do other things. And, you know, it really saddens me to think that people come on this earth and aren't able to have just a decent, you know, experience in terms of the basics. So that's what I would wish for.
Hmm. What are you most focused on right now, and why?
Um, right now, I would say my three biggest areas are: one, I'm really excited about rebuilding the paralegal program at Oakton. I think that could, you know, for potential students, give them an avenue and a career path that could, you know, be very valuable to them and have real payoff for them. And then I would say second, I'm working on really building out and being more vocal about what's going on in AI, because we are getting to a place where, you know, people have, and here around the world, but here in the US, they're going to start passing laws that impact us. And particularly as minorities. So I mostly advise in the healthcare space, and you know, we often talk about disparities in either diseases, treatments, whatever the case is. And so there's this idea in AI about bias. And so for people of color, I think it's really important to balance that, right? Because me being a Black woman is very relevant to my care. And so I don't necessarily need you to get rid of all bias, right? Because if me being Black makes a difference, then AI needs to know and understand that, right? But also, like, you shouldn't be building algorithms that make negative decisions for me just because I'm Black. And so I think it's really important to have people of color's voices in the rooms on these issues, as we start to build out these frameworks and laws and regulations. And then I would say the last part is, you know, building our brands just in terms of what we're doing with the rum, what we're doing with the app, and really seeing those things come to full fruition towards the end of this year.
What can your community do to support you?
So, first and foremost, of course, so we've sold out of rum, which is great, and we appreciate that. But once we're back in the mix, feel free to grab a bottle. You can hit our website, halo7rum.com. You know, I'm always about supporting my nonprofits. So if you are so inclined, you can go to Community Justice Alliance California, so cjaca.org. And that will get you to that page. Support iLead. We actually have we'll have an event coming up in June, and that's just iLead foundation.org. And then if you know, I'm not a big social media person, but if you ever need to get in contact with me, I can be reached at ajackson@asajesq.com. But I'm always happy to meet, chat with folks, because I think that's how we, you know, come up with the best solutions and learn, you know, learn what we need to in terms of moving forward with whatever we have going on. So I'm always up for a chat.
Nice. What other visions do you have for your community?
For my community, I will say I look at things on kind of a different level. On a personal level, I definitely want to put myself in a position to have more of a financial impact and financial contribution, so that I support not only my own nonprofits, but also, I can support local or regional nonprofits based on whatever, the current need is. On a business level, I would love to see, I should say business/legal. I would love to see the organizations I'm in make real impact, and influence on some of the laws and regulations that are coming down, in the context of what we do with respect to immigration and communities of color for CJA, to the extent that we can be in rooms with people that are writing the laws, providing our experiences with the communities we serve so that their voices are heard and considered when those laws are actually being written. And with respect to, the things that are happening with iLead, obviously we know, we've seen the news clips of kids downtown, doing things they shouldn't be doing. And there's a real crisis in the city, and I would love to see us be able to, again, provide insight. So as the city's thinking of policies, as people are trying to figure out how to deploy resources, being in the room to help them make those decisions, because I think we offer really practical and realistic solutions, and perspectives that sometimes, people sitting in offices that don't talk to kids every day just don't have. And then I guess on the personal level, my goal is always to keep my peace, keep my joy, get rid of things that don't contribute to either of those. And, I always try to keep an open mind and stay flexible in terms of my visions for myself and the future.
How big do you think iLead can be? It sounds like it can be huge, but how big do you think it can be as being one of the creators or one of the on the board? And
Yeah, I think that it could be a national program. I hesitate to say national only because we're definitely creating a blueprint that could be recreated. I think there are a lot of organizations that seek to do, exactly what we do. And so I don't know that it's, we need an iLead chapter in every city, but rather really collaborate with other nonprofits seeking to do the same thing and providing them with resources and a template to produce, to have reproducible results, basically. So, it'll be interesting to see what that leads to, but I will say I have found it very fulfilling that, the impact that we've had on students' lives that we've worked with so far.
thanks. What does liberation look like for Black women?
Ooh. That's a great question. What does liberation look like? Let's start with pay equity, just to begin with, right? We're doing the same job, make sure we get dollar for dollar. I think another aspect of that is making sure, and this applies to all women generally, but making sure we have autonomy over our bodies. For Black women, I don't just refer to reproductive justice, but also making sure we are free from violence in not only our own communities, but also from law enforcement and from communities outside of our own. And I think it goes back to when you asked me about my superpower, that when we put in 10 times the work, we're accelerated 10 times ahead and not just meeting their standard, right? And I think that when Black women feel like they are on an equal footing in this world, the world will be an amazing place. But I will say that on a personal level, I get tired and I get exhausted. And I am always rejuvenated when, you know, especially like around election times and you see the numbers and you're like, yes, Black women did it, right?
Mhm.
And so, you know, I think though those three things, if we could get that done, I think we would be in a great place.
Well, Ashley, I want to say thank you. This has been a great conversation. You've dropped a bunch of jewels and gems that I didn't think you were gonna even drop. I have to admit. But I want to thank you for your time, your gems, your jewels, your information. And please don't hesitate to let us know when these things are coming up so that I can let the people know as well.
I will. And thank you for doing this. This is wonderful.
You're very welcome. Thank you.